Talking about the American dream, talking about opportunity, talking about being willing to step out, and in part, I got to tell you my own personal story. You say, geez, kicked out of high school in the 10th grade, and in fact, the way I could get the only reason I could take the GED is because they got a court order preventing me from coming back in. It was that bad, seriously, and thus I could go to college when my peers were going to 10th grade. But the point is that, how did I get there? How did I get to the point where, you could do that? It wasn't, like some miracle. I remember, and I've told this story to my kids so many times, and others. My peer in this, I'm going to change his name because I'm pretty sure that I've got all these details right, but I may have some little tiny detail. There might be some little piece of it that's wrong because, after all, it's been a lot of years. 57 was a long time ago. But my recollection is it was 56, 57. I think it was 57 when Sputnik went up. And in fact, we could hear it in our classroom. One of our teachers had a shortwave radio, and you could hear this thing go bing, 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 bing as it went across the sky, and it just terrified America. And Eisenhower said, okay, we've got to do something. We've got to create a generation of engineers and scientists. And so they came into I don't know if it was all the schools, but they certainly came into our school, the school that I was in elementary. I was in second grade. And they came into our school, and we all had to take these kind of standardized tests, as it were, to figure out if we were smart. And myself and one friend of mine, we'll call him Jerry, were pulled out of our class and basically told, okay, you go to class, my recollection is half the day, half the time, and half the time you can, sit in this room and just study anything you want, and this, various teachers or counselors or whatever will be available to answer questions or help you out, and you'll have access to the library and all that kind of stuff. And by the end of sixth grade, I was reading at college levels. I was doing math. I was starting trig. I was starting to understand trigonometry. I'd been through algebra and geometry. Had some vague notion of what calculus was. I had read a number of the classics. I had had 2 years of Spanish. I'd had 2 years of Latin. I mean, all that stuff, right? And I was 12. And in the middle of this, when I was around 8 or 9, now my friend Jerry, his dad was a psychologist. My dad worked in a tool and die shop. But my friend's dad was a psychologist, and he had this whole library of psychology books at home. And we used to just love reading these things. My two favorites were, one, this book on the Rorschach test, which I'm going to tell you about, and the other was by Richard von Krafft-Ebing. It was called Psychopathia Sexualis. And if you are old enough to remember when that book was around, it's probably still around. I mean, it was written like in the early 20th century, maybe late 19th century, and it was about sexual weirdnesses. But in any case, we had this. My friend Jerry had this. His dad had this book on the Rorschach test. So we read this book on the Rorschach test, how it worked, and we were like, "Wow, that's fascinating." And it was particularly fascinating to us because 4 times a year, as I recall, might have just been twice a year, but it was a couple times a year, the school counselor, who was this sweet little 23-year-old who had just graduated from college with her degree in school counseling, and she was just all so enthusiastic. I mean, just, central casting first grade teacher, right? I mean, she was just this sweetheart. And she would come in and she would sit my friend Jerry and I down in separate rooms and give us the Rorschach test to see if our little minds were being twisted by all this knowledge that was being crammed into us. Because it was an experiment. Nobody had ever done this before. So we read this book, and Jerry and I said, hey, let's do this. And he was like, okay, I'll take violence, you take sex. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we went in, and she comes in, and she says, so what do you see in this ink blot? The Rorschach test is the ink blot test. She said, what do you see in this ink blot? And I'm like, what are they doing behind that keyhole? And, she shows me the next one, and she says, what are they doing in this? What's going on in this ink block? And I said, shouldn't they have clothes on? And, in the next one, I genuinely don't remember my exact answers, but there were variations on these, Are you sure a little kid like me should be seeing pictures like this? And, that kind of stuff. I mean, and my friend Jerry was, oh, the blood. How did that blood get all, and is that are his brains on the floor? And stuff like that. She was so horrified Now, we didn't realize at the time. Because she just kind of kept an even face. I mean, that's how you do it when you do the Rorschach test. And we had no idea if we got her or not. And about 5 days later, my parents, my dad, came to me and said, your mom and I and you are going to school for a conference tonight. And he did not sound happy. And I was like, uh-oh. So we go to this conference, and there's Jerry and his dad and mom, and me and my dad and mom, and the principal and the vice principal, and two of my teachers, and the school counselor. And the school counselor says basically, sorry to break bad news to you, but the Rorschach tests are showing that your kids are being really badly influenced by something, and we're concerned that it might be, what they're learning in school. Is there anything else in their home environment that could be doing this? And they were all just like taking this so seriously. And finally, Jerry and I are like, it was a joke. We read this book on the Rorschach test. We punked you. And she was totally not buying it, right? I mean, her reputation was on the line. She was totally not buying it. She was like, no way. And we were like, yeah, we just made that stuff up. She says, come on, you're 8 years old. You're not smart enough to make this stuff up. Or 9 years old, by the way. However, it was early. And finally, well, not finally, I mean, it was just a few sentences into it. My friend's dad speaks up and says, I have a book on the Rorschach test at home. And Jerry says, yeah, that's the one we read. And it just kind of all falls apart. And this poor counselor, this poor guidance counselor, she just gets this look like, that's it. And in fact, we never saw her again. I don't know if she lost her job, and I still feel guilty to this day if she did, or if she just went to another school, or if they just gave up on testing us, because they may have continued testing us. I have genuinely no recollection of it. But the point is that back then, and I wrote an op-ed piece about this. If you Google my name and gifted students, you'll probably find it. It was maybe a decade ago I wrote it. That some incredibly small percentage of our federal and state budget goes to gifted children in the United States. It's something like 0.0001%. I mean, it's a fragment compared to the part of our budget that goes to kids who are trying to catch up. Now, I'm all in favor of giving a lot of money to kids who are trying to catch up and helping them achieve their potential. But there are a lot of gifted kids out there, a lot of really smart kids out there who don't need to go through 12 years of high school. I mean, we saw this in our own family. Our youngest kid, we homeschooled for the last few years. And she ended up, much like I did, taking a GED and goes straight into college while her peers were in high school. And, I think that I'm not, as you've heard many times, I'm not a fan of charter schools. I think that charter schools paid for with public money are a way of destroying public schools. That said, I think one of the huge areas that we're missing in our public school system is our gifted kids. We're not providing them with the resources that they need to become everything they could be. And by the way, they do provide those kids with those resources in Denmark and in Singapore, the two countries that rank highest in the world in outcomes, in educational outcomes. And increasingly they are in other countries around the world. And we're not. We're still fighting battles over whether we're going to pay unionized teachers in Chicago a decent salary, or whether a third of the schools having no libraries is too many or not enough. Do you get how far we've come? I mean, that was I'm comparing 1958, 1959 to today. And I realize, there's probably, especially for those of you who are much younger than me, a certain element of, listen to the old fart complain about the good old days. But it was real. Eisenhower and Jack Kennedy actually were committed to building a nation of scientists and engineers, and then Kennedy took it a step further based on the foundation that Dwight Eisenhower laid in 1957 and said, we will put a man on the moon within 10 years. And right now, we're in a situation where, if Barack Obama got up and said, we're going to send a family to Hawaii, Mitt Romney would stand up and yell, we can't afford it. It's not in the budget. Forget about the moon. Do you get how far we've gone? And how have we gotten this far? By theft. This whole Reaganomics trickle-down theory, this whole Laffer curve, let's cut the taxes on the very rich. Let's cut the taxes on the corporation. Let's start the race to the bottom. Oh, and now that we've cut taxes, we're out of money. Look at this huge deficit. Well, I guess we've got to cut spending. Where are we going to cut spending? Well, let's start with our schools. Gifted kids, to hell with them. Kids who aren't living up to their potential because their parents are homeless, to hell with them. Police officers having good, competent training, high stand. Nah, we don't need that. Let's close some fire stations while we're at it. Keeping our roads in good shape. High-speed rail? What, are you kidding? That's French. Do you get my point? I mean, this used to be the American dream. And it's been blown up. And I think, frankly, this campaign actually has a good chunk of that as an undercurrent, too.